let's ask Mr. Jafar about that. Do you think it's too risky now to start reconstruction projects in affected area, liberated area?
Thank you. So actually, when it comes to Iraq, we have never stopped. As a group, we've invested close to $2.5 billion over the last 10 years in Iraq, in all areas. In the northern Kurdistan region, we've invested in the electricity sector. The electricity, which has been drained, is fueled by gas. We've been producing for 10 years now. We've invested over $1 billion there. We have a large staff. Almost 90% is local staff. In the center of the country, one of our affiliates has done 4 or 5 now power stations. One of them was actually damaged by Daesh, and then they've renovated it now and fixed it. It's now generating electricity.
Who paid the bill?
I'm sorry?
For that? Who paid the bill for that, for working on what was...
It was contracts with the Ministry of Electricity, but now the new contracts are being done on an investment basis, not on a contracting basis, because the federal government doesn't have the budget anymore. And then in the south, also in the port management and Qasr. So we're investing in the infrastructure space across. And I think it is definitely for Iraq, the time is there.
What about Syria?
So Syria, clearly the challenges of the war is still going. And this is, if we look at the countries that are most affected in the region today, Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen, they all have something in common. They were all ruled very strongly centrally by dictatorship for decades. They all had some element of oil wealth. This usually doesn't help when you look at it. And they are very diverse populations, either with tribes or with sects or with ethnicities. And now putting it back together, as Kristalina says, the physical infrastructure part is important, and Iraq and the World Bank, I believe, are estimating $100 billion needs for just Iraq. Maybe twice or 3 times will be for Syria. But then how do you rebuild the communities? You can't have the same social contract, the same model.
Mr. Jafar, I need to ask you this question, just a small question, and then you can make your comment. Where the business sector or the private sector generate more money, during war or peace?
So it's not quite as simple as that. I mean, generally, capital is a coward, as they say, and you need the right balance of risk and reward.
Follow-up question. Do you have a say on the politician if you're happy with war in certain area to continue the war? Do you push for that? Like we always say that the business sector doesn't, doesn't have a human face.
Maybe you're talking about the arms industry. That's another thing. But we don't have arms companies in the Middle East. We buy a lot, but we don't have any. From our point of view, we are from the region. And the way we look at risk is different from a Western or foreign investor. And we're there to stay, and we're investing in this region. We have no choice. This is our home. But the role of institutions like Kristalina's, like the bank, when they come in with money and the World Bank name, this kind of gives a guarantee which can unlock and leverage much more investment from the private sector. We have a lot of money in our region, in governments in our region, especially in Gulf countries, and also in the private sector in our region. But it needs the right framework to be unlocked. So I actually funded a group of ex-World Bank economists to look at this some years ago, after the Arab Spring happened. We called it an Arab Stabilization Plan. And you can see it, it's arabplan.org in English and Arabic online, what a Marshall Plan for the region would look like. So Kristalina mentioned the end of the Second World War. The reason that was done was not because the United States had a big heart for Europe and Japan, and it was for national security interests. They wanted to stop the spread of communism, and it worked. They created hugely successful economies in Western Europe, and the wall came down. Now, as Sayyid said, Sayyid Saleh, we have to combat the rise of extremism. And the way to do that is rebuilding these areas. Your video showed that 1% is being spent compared to what's spent on the war. We need to somehow rebalance the incentives. And for that, the West and the rest need to see their national security interests are in rebuilding these areas. Otherwise, they're going to see something worse than Daesh in the future. And their commercial interests. US companies did hugely well out of the new markets of Western Europe and Japan. They need to see benefits from reconstructing the Middle East also. No, I just want to echo and add to the points, and your question is very, very apt. If we just go through the same old model and relying on the central government, you could try to restore the failed social contracts. So the private sector's role is absolutely key, and I'm very happy to see that Kristalina and the bank are giving 1 day for the private sector in Kuwait on Iraq, and they've identified more than 20 projects.
Are you going to be there with your checkbook?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
But also I would add that you know, it can't be a donor model where this thing is done to you. It needs to be done with you and through you. But also not the you is not only the central government. I think in these countries with broken societies, you're not going to bypass the central government, but you must get the buy-in of the local, regional government or municipality or city. That way you can make sure you're not backing one side in the state against the other.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jafar, briefly, please.
So I again, totally endorse this point on education. There's no point if we build all these projects and all these potential opportunities and our young potential workforce doesn't have the right education to match that. We already have more and more graduates in our region and more youth unemployment, 30%, the highest. And that's aside from the refugees and the IDPs who have been left out of education for so many years. And we don't have time to go back to school. We need to start using some technologies, including online delivery. There's platforms like Idrak, with which I'm involved, which is now educating people even in the refugee camps. It must go part and parcel with the actual reconstruction effort.
Thank you very much.